So recently, Disney released a new trailer for their celebratory 100-year anniversary film, titled Wish. And with that came many press interviews, more specifically this one by IGN where they talked about how the film was originally considered to have 2D animation, amongst other things, and well, people had various opinions on this article to say the least. So I want to break down what was said in this article, who said it, why they said it, and if the criticism is justified. So to start off, this article is about a conversation with executive producer / writer for Wish, Jennifer Lee, who is also the chief creative officer at Walt Disney Animation Studios. So this is an individual who would have some authority over the film and its production, and that she does talk about. And to not bury the lead too much here, let's get to the quote that everybody's talking about. But to give some context, in the beginning she talks about how 2D animation as a medium was heavily thought about during the start of production, and that it wasn't about whether they can't or it can, more so it was about what they wanted to do for the project. Which is a perfectly understandable mindset in all honesty. She then goes on about the movie's aesthetic choices and how the main goal for the directors was for, quote, a film where there is no break from the artist's vision to the screen. And then we finally get to the moment we all been waiting for. What happens in hand-drawn animation is that you have the incredible hand of the artist, but also the limitations in what you could do on screen. What happens in CG is that you have incredible boundless opportunities, visually, that elevated it, even to the point of, for some, into realism, which is not what we wanted to do. The more important thing to us was to have a way to find technology that can do everything, connect to the true vision of the artist, but bring in technology that could finally take away limitations. Okay, let's break this down piece by piece. Okay, so the first part, hand-drawn animation has limitations. In a general broad sense, 2D isn't really restricted to anything outside of the artist's imagination. These limitations are related only to the artist's skill level. I'd argue one of the strengths of 2D is its malleable nature. You can literally draw whatever you want. If you can visualize it, there's a chance that you can do it. Stuff like expressions and squash and stretch, which are both part of the 12 principles of animation, are pretty good examples of this malleability in my opinion. Meanwhile, 3D, while having its own advantages like realism, more elaborate camera movements, amongst other things, is typically restricted to things like models, character rigs, and aspects compatible to the software. But this isn't to say CG hasn't or can't express itself in its own unique ways, or even have its own unique appeal. It's that in the grand scheme of things, it requires a lot more technical know-how, compared to 2D, which has this sort of raw, spontaneous nature to it, and it's more about feeling things out.
3D animation is a very rigid process because you're dealing with mathematics and values over time. And so raw and spontaneous on a cold machine, like a computer, is exceptionally complicated. Whereas when you're drawing, you're feeling things out. We just had to find a way to do it. It's just about keeping it loose and just kind of like finding a feeling rather than technical perfection.
Which the word technical, or I should say technology, is going to be a major sticking point of her next quote. The more important thing to us was to have a way to find technology that can do everything, connect to the true vision of the artist, but bring in technology that could finally take away limitations. So to start off, I think her comment about how in CG you almost have endless possibilities in terms of the visuals is entirely in relation to Wish itself, and what they want to achieve with the project. I say this because immediately after, she talks about the idea of realism within CG, which is something that Disney has done with many of their own films for the past half-decade, and that visual direction wouldn't have fit for what they were trying to do with Wish, and that they want to lean more into non-photorealism as their contemporaries have also done, and have seen great success with. That's at least my good faith interpretation of these comments. And I feel a similar way when I look at her opinions about 2D animation from that perspective, where I don't think she's saying 2D as a medium is overall limiting. More of that for Wish, as a movie from a production standpoint, 2D animation wasn't achieving the results they were looking for. And she does later explain in the article that the shift to CG was more because of complex character movements and characterization, which I think is a decent enough clarification on her comments on the limitations of 2D. Hello, this is me from the future. I just wanted to make a little bit of addendum to this character movements, my comments here, because I just remembered about Deep Canvas, which they first used in Tarzan back in, I think, 1998 was when that movie first came out. And that was a whole technology meant to blend 2D and 3D and painted assets together. And they also later used it on, like, I think Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Treasure Planet is a big one. And so her comments about, like, oh, we went to CG for character movements and, not character movements, camera movements and characterization. It's like, yeah, that's a benefit of 3D, but also you have to remember James Baxter in like Beauty and the Beast in 1995. That was with like the help of 3D, but the animation was all 2D. It was all drawn by hand, all by him.
On the Beast dancing, that was drawn by a human being, a mere mortal, with pencil on a piece of paper to fit into that beautiful computer graphics ballroom.
So you did it in the 90s, you even did it in the 2000s, so I can understand where she's kind of coming from, but it just comes off as silly when you look back at their history. But hey, it's your movie, make it the way you want, I guess. The characterization part I'm a bit iffy about because I'm pretty sure you can do that very well in 2D, but whatever. But unfortunately, these clarifications don't really exist when it comes to her comments about how they wanted to find technology that can do everything and could connect with the artistic vision and take away all those limitations. Again, I think she's referring to these technological applications in the context of Wish, but it still comes off to me as not descriptive enough. Like, what is this technology she's talking about? Did Disney internally produce something new that could be added to a pipeline or a completely new pipeline altogether? How is it taking away these so-called limitations? Pixar themselves have also created various technologies for their films, but I never thought of Pixar making those said technologies because they were limitations or they needed them to do everything. They made them because that's what the film in question called for, whether narratively, visually, what have you. Which Disney may be approaching this movie with that mindset, but again, it's not very descriptive in my opinion. And that's mostly what frustrates me about this article overall, because after that, the rest of the article is nothing really to write home about. So for final thoughts, this article was just a weird thing to read. And while I can understand some of her comments from a creative standpoint, they also come off as a little bit tone deaf, especially if you've been online and you hear people wanting Disney to make another 2D film. So her comments about like 2D animation and sort of downplaying it, especially with the context of it being the 100th anniversary and, you know, the history of Disney, they became the juggernaut as they are because of those 2D films, well, also other stuff like merchandising and rights and leasing and all that stuff, but still, this doesn't come off looking very good, even though I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt that she didn't mean it to come off that way. And while I can understand where some of the criticism and discourse is coming from, and I do think some of the points are very valid, I do feel some of the framing of this article and her comments from others on social media are slightly disingenuous and a little bit bad faith. Again, some, not all. And all of this to me is funny because I honestly don't really feel much for Wish, at least from what I've seen from the trailers. This looks like another average Disney movie to me, especially when it comes to the animation. Like, yeah, I think the animators are doing like a decent job here, and I don't think they're like bad artists, but like the painterly style they're going for doesn't look super obvious. Like in screenshots, like I think this one I'm gonna throw up, like you can kind of see it a bit more, but like in motion, I can't really see it that much. Like, I just think of Arcane and I think it does that painted aesthetic so much better. It just doesn't feel like Disney's fully embracing this stylized CG animation route. Like, I look at TMNT Mutant Mayhem and then obviously the Spider-Verse movies and like Puss in Boots and of course a couple of other things. And it just looks like they're really embracing the style a lot more than what Disney looks like they're doing. But hey, it's their movie, they're gonna do what they do. But I do hope the movie does turn out good, and when it comes out, we get to see that technology that Lee's talking about, and it gets put to excellent use. But hey, in the end, those are just my thoughts. Tell me yours in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.